Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. In today's video, I'm going to continue going through my rookie rankings for the 2022 draft class. So a few days ago, I put out like my round one rankings. So basically like the 101 through the 112, put a player at every spot, and that's how I kind of rank them. So in this video, I'll be going through round two. So, going through number 13 through 24 overall. And let's just jump right into it. Starting off at the 201, I have George Pickens, and he's a guy that I actually ranked a little bit lower in my wide receiver rankings, but he's kind of steadily moving his way up, and I think I moved him up 2 spots ahead of both Olave and Jahan Dotson. And even though he didn't have like the perfect finish to his collegiate career, he didn't have a great sophomore season and then tore his ACL before the 2021 season, which kind of limited him obviously down the stretch. Played in 4 or 5 games, but just wasn't super productive, which I think, you'd probably expect coming off of that serious of an injury. But when I'm just looking at his ceiling, it is so high. He produced at a very high level as a freshman. He caught 49 passes for 727 yards and 8 touchdowns. And that was, not against some weak conference. That was against tough SEC competition. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. I just think he has the potential to be an alpha wide receiver in the NFL. Right now, it looks like Pickens is going to be a day 2 pick. So round 2, round 3, but I really wouldn't be shocked if his stock starts to rise as we get closer to draft day. We'll see how he looks at the combine, if the players are even going to go to that, and then his pro day, because I do think he's definitely a guy who's going to be a riser as opposed to falling from his current draft price. At the 202, I've got another receiver. It is Chris Olave. I expect Olave to be a first-round pick in rookie drafts. He's probably going to be, late first. I'm just a little bit lower on him, and every receiver I've ranked ahead of him I think has the potential to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver, and I just don't know if that is in the cards for Chris Olave. Don't get me wrong, he is a very good receiver. I think he's going to be a good receiver at the NFL level, but as a senior at Ohio State, he was the wide receiver 3, was outperformed by both a sophomore and a junior, so I just don't know if he has that elite level ceiling like a guy like George Pickens could have. I think probably the best case scenario for Chris Olave would be to land on a good offense where he can slot in as like a really, really solid wide receiver 2. Some examples would be like the Packers. If Rodgers returns, they bring back Devontae Adams. You slot Chris Olave in there as the wide receiver 2. I think he would be a fantasy stud. Maybe a team like the Chargers, if they don't re-sign Mike Williams, pair him with Keenan Allen. But just 2 kind of examples there. And then for the third straight wide receiver, at the 203, I have Jahan Dotson. And there's really a lot to like here with Dotson. He produced as a sophomore, fairly solid production, but then went out his junior and senior year and was absolutely dominant. He's a super, super explosive athlete, and he does have the ability to win all over the field. I'd say the main concern for Dotson is his size. He's listed at 5'11", 184 pounds. Not really sure if I'm buying that 5'11". If he's 5'10" at the combine or his pro day, I don't think it'd be a huge deal. But when you start getting to that like 5'9", 5'8" range, it's just going to be tough to be a stud wide receiver at the next level. So we'll just kind of see how that plays out. Now off the wide receiver position, at the 204, I have Kyren Williams out of Notre Dame. He's kind of the start of the second tier of running back behind, the Breece Halls, Isaiah Spiller, and Kenneth Walker. He was Notre Dame's workhorse the past 2 seasons. I'd say probably the biggest red flag for Kyren Williams is his size. 5'9", 195 pounds, significantly smaller than most of the other top running backs in this class, which is definitely not ideal for a 3-down back. But, in the second round of rookie drafts, every running back is going to be flawed in some way. I would say that Kyren Williams is arguably the best pass-catching running back in this class, but he's also very solid on the ground, and I do think he's kind of under the radar, very solid in between the tackles, which is something you don't think he would be great at, being 5'9", sub 200 pounds. What I like about Kyren Williams is that, he may not be a slam dunk, 3-down, workhorse back in the NFL, but I feel like his floor is like a really solid receiving back because we know he can do that, but he does have that extra upside, if he does get the opportunity to be the number 1 for a team, just like a guy like Austin Eckler did. I feel like that's like his peak ceiling. But, for every Austin Eckler, there's a ton of other just standard receiving, third down backs. Now at the 205, I have Rachaad White, and he's another running back who is a very capable receiver out of the backfield. He kind of bounced around early in his collegiate career before arriving at Arizona State, but when he got there as a junior, he produced right away. Even though he is a very solid receiver out of the backfield and was very involved in that area in college, he is still built like your prototypical 3-down back, 6'2", 210 pounds. If he gets up there, 215, 220, you're looking at an absolute tank at the running back position. I would just say that right now, the biggest thing that is holding back White is his current draft stock. I think I originally did have Rachaad White ahead of Kyren Williams in my running back rankings, but the more I'm kind of looking into potential draft capital, it does look like Kyren Williams is going to be a potential day 2 pick. I don't know if that is in the cards for Rachaad White. So, the opportunity may just be different between those two players, because if Rachaad White does go, on day 3, maybe 4th round's fine, but you start getting into 5th, 6th, 7th, could definitely limit his overall opportunities. And just, he may never get a chance to lead a backfield if the draft capital is not there. Here at the 206, we are back to the wide receiver position with Christian Watson. And he's honestly not the typical wide receiver I like to target. His production profile is not fantastic. He had kind of questionable competition coming out of North Dakota State. You're obviously not playing, the elite corners there. But like I mentioned with the running backs, at this point in the draft, there's not going to be any slam dunk options. And Christian Watson looked like he was going to be like a late day 3 pick before he showed up to the Senior Bowl and absolutely balled out. Not talking about in the game, he was solid, but practices all week long. He was just cooking these corners who are going to be drafted and likely playing on Sundays. So he went out, he showed he can compete with the top competition, even though he is coming out of, a smaller school. Remember, that is where Trey Lance went. So we did play a little bit with Trey Lance. But when you look at him physically, he is what every team is looking for at this day and age in the NFL. He's 6'4", 6'5", over 200 pounds, and just an athletic freak. So, when we see him test at the combine or at his pro day, I feel like, his draft stock is only going to rise. And I'm pretty confident right now that he is going to be a day 2 pick, whether it's round 2 or round 3. And with that draft capital and that size, he could definitely be a big time producer at the NFL level. We've got another wide receiver here at the 207. It is Justyn Ross out of Clemson. He definitely, has a flawed profile with some red flags, but he has some crazy high ceiling. So Justyn Ross broke out as a freshman, caught 46 passes for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. Once again, against pretty solid competition. He had Trevor Lawrence throwing him the ball, and that is over 20 yards per reception. He took a little bit of a step back as a sophomore, but was still very solid, produced. Then he missed the entire 2020 season with a neck and spine issue. Obviously, that's probably the most concerning injury you could have as an NFL player. That is not stuff you want to mess around with. He then returned in 2021, and he was okay, but he really was not set up for success with DJ. I think it's like Ungalele at quarterback. Everyone thought he was going to be a stud, did not produce. So not having good quarterback play, it definitely limited Justyn Ross as a senior. There's obviously a lot of risk here. He's not going to get the elite draft capital, and there may be some, concern with that neck, spine issue. But I do think the upside of Justyn Ross is worth the risk here in like the mid-second round. At the 208, I have Tyler Allgeier, who is a fairly well-rounded prospect, BYU's workhorse running back the past 2 seasons. In 2021, Allgeier absolutely balled out, totaled 1,800 scrimmage yards and 23 touchdowns. Allgeier actually got some reps at linebacker during his time at BYU, and you can see that with his frame. 5'11", so not super tall, but 220 pounds, just built like an absolute tank. He's a very physical runner and is very explosive in the open field. He's also honestly a fairly competent receiver out of the backfield, which I think kind of goes under the radar a little bit. Draft capital will likely be a determining factor here, whether he moves up or down these rankings. If he's like a 3rd, 4th round, I feel like he may move up. If he's 5th, 6th, 7th, then may slot down a few slots. Now we're kind of getting into like this second or maybe third tier of quarterback group. So I had 4 quarterbacks go in the first round. I believe in order it was Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, and then Sam Howell. Here at the 209, I have Desmond Ridder. He is my quarterback 5. Looks like he is going to be a day 2 pick, a 4-year starter at Cincinnati. He definitely made some large improvements heading into the 2021 season, where he threw for 3,334 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He also added 355 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. I do think he's firmly behind that group of quarterbacks that I just mentioned, but I do think he should still be like a second, probably late second round pick in rookie drafts if he is given that solid draft capital. And then right behind him, I have my final quarterback here in the first 2 rounds, Carson Strong at the 210, just a pure pocket passer, 6'3", 220, 225 pounds. He's not going to give you any production with his legs, but he can sling it a little bit. In the 2021 season, he threw for 4,186 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions with a 70.2% completion percentage. I honestly think landing spot could play a large factor in Strong's success, because if you put him on a team where he's able to sit back with a solid offensive line and some capable weapons and just kind of read the field and deal, I think he could definitely find success. But if you bring him in, throw him in as a starter and ask him to do too much right away, I think it could be an absolute disaster. At the 211, I have the first tight end coming off the board. It is Trey McBride. He's obviously the number 1 tight end in my rankings, a senior out of Colorado State. And in 12 games this past year, McBride caught 90 passes for 1,121 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that is sensational production at the tight end position for a college athlete. And aside from the low touchdown numbers, McBride was a massive part of the passing attack. He actually doubled Colorado State's number 2 pass catcher in yards and receptions. So he was so clearly by far and away the number 1 target on this team. He has the NFL size, 6'4", 260 pounds. He may not, be an elite athlete, but I do think he's going to be above league average. So maybe he lacks, the elite ceiling of a guy like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, those guys. But I think he could totally slot in as like a mid-tier tight end 1, at some point in his career. And I don't see why he couldn't, be a top 12 tight end consistently. And now the final player in these rankings at the 212, I have Wan'Dale Robinson. And I think I'm likely going to be lower on him than most people. And a lot of it is just going to come down to his size. He is listed at 5'10", 185 pounds. But I bet when he's measured at the combine or his pro day, he's probably going to be closer to 5'8". He did ball out his junior year, caught 104 passes for 1,334 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's a fantastic playmaker with the ball in his hands. But just going back to that size, if you're not used perfectly, with that skill set, it's just going to be tough to produce at the next level. As we saw with Rondale Moore, Moore balled out in college, was a sensational athlete, and still just couldn't really find his footing as a rookie. So that's the concern. But if he comes in at 5'10", maybe even 5'9", I may move him up a little bit. But if he's shorter than that, I just feel like I'm not going to have many shares because there's just too much risk. And he is explosive enough that someone is going to reach for him probably, mid second round, maybe late second round. But hopefully there would be some better options available. But that is going to wrap it up for round 2 of my rankings. Thank you guys for sticking, through this entire thing. If you enjoyed it, just do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But thank you all again, and I'll see you in the next one.